Stephanie Lange is an Australian cultural critic and commentator whose very popular YouTube show, she has close to 2 million followers and subscribers, is something I discovered by accident when, as I said, YouTube's algorithm gods, for whatever reason, decided to place that show in front of me. I randomly watched one of her videos and quickly understood how actually undercovered and impactful the topics are that she covers, and she covers them with a great amount of insight and passion and I think individual perspective. In particular, there's a huge increase in the number of young adults and even adolescents in the West and in the US who are now seeking out and paying for very extensive various plastic surgeries, often extremely distorting and unhealthy procedures that can cause long-term or even permanent damage, not only to one's appearance, but also their mental and physical health. And we are delighted to have Stephanie with us here to talk about that. Stephanie, good evening. It's great to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Hi, Glenn. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I feel a little disoriented. Usually I just see you on your show, and now suddenly you're here on mine. It's like being a child and seeing your teacher at the shopping mall outside of school, and you just feel a little confused, but I'll try and navigate through that. So let me ask you, because I do feel like one of the reasons why I just now watch your videos religiously is because you take these topics that are sort of covered. You know, there's a lot of kind of niche content on the internet, just speculating on various celebrities and whether they got certain plastic surgeries, kind of celebrity gossip about showing how celebrities who often falsely deny they got surgeries, in fact got them. There are doctors who do that. It can be pretty interesting content. But you take it, I think, many steps further in kind of trying to understand what the cultural undercurrents are that are causing so many more people, and particularly young people, to seek out really advanced and often invasive plastic surgeries. What made you or prompted you to decide to focus on that?
Probably my own experience, to be honest. I've been in the beauty industry for a long time. I was a makeup artist for a long time before I kind of made YouTube my job, as is now. So I've kind of seen the trend before it was a trend and now where it is, which is almost an unhealthy obsession. And I've seen, like, you know, myself, I was impacted by it. I've had Botox and fillers in the past. I thought it was the best thing since sliced bread until I started looking into it further. I became pregnant with my first son, and I've been pregnant and breastfeeding for the last almost 6 years. And so I stopped getting those tweakments done. And that kind of pause allowed me to step back, actually look at it from a different angle, research what exactly I was doing to my face. And what I discovered was kind of horrifying, because these aren't things that they're not widely known. You know, plastic surgery, fillers, Botox, they've become so normalized that it's almost the same as just going to your hairdresser and getting your hair done. But people don't realize that there are actually long-term health impacts. And it can almost turn into a bit of an addiction as well.
Yeah, I mean, I want to talk about the dangers of particular procedures, whether extensive and kind of exotic ones or even the more common ones that you just named, because that's one of the things I really didn't realize until I started paying attention to this topic largely because of you. But before I get to that, I just want to look at the numbers. Like, these numbers, just any way you slice it, show a massive boom in plastic surgeries in general. In September 2023, the International Society of Aesthetic Plastic Surgery found, quote, an 11.2% overall increase in procedures performed by plastic surgeons in 2022, with more than 14.9 million surgical and 18.8 million non-surgical procedures performed worldwide, and a continuing rise in, quote, aesthetic surgery, with a 41.3% increase over the last 4 years. I mean, those are massive numbers, showing just kind of almost epidemic behavior, just huge numbers of people who never previously even considered doing this now seeking it out. Why do you think that is? What accounts for this massive increase?
I mean, in my opinion, it would have to be celebrity culture and social media. So, you know, young women and women, I'm 36, women my age and older, we're seeing these filtered images online of, you know, people we know in real life, celebrities, influencers, and what we're seeing in the mirror and what we're seeing through social media, through these filters, it doesn't match up. And so what you're seeing in the mirror suddenly doesn't look very good compared to the filtered version itself and the filtered version of these other people that you're seeing. So we're marketed, you know, fillers and Botox as being a non-invasive, temporary way to kind of make yourself almost feel in real life. And so because it's not really plastic surgery, technically it's become so popularized and so normal. I mean, you can get it done in your lunch break. it's not as expensive as plastic surgery, and we're told that it's temporary and that if it goes wrong, it's not a big deal because you can just get it dissolved. But it turns out there's new evidence that suggests it's actually not that simple, and these fillers don't actually dissolve like we've been told they do, and that even getting them dissolved can have added, side effects that we're not aware of.
One of the particular focal points that I think deserves a lot of attention, because on some level, adults being persuaded by advertisements and cultural pressures to do things that are not in their interests is fairly common, but they're adults. You trust them to make their decisions. What really strikes me is the number of adolescents and very young adults who are getting plastic surgeries that they do not need. It's not like they were born with some kind of deformity or birth defect and they're getting it corrected. It's purely aesthetic. And just listen to these numbers. The American Society of Plastic and Reconstructive Surgeons in 2020, so this is 4 years ago, I'm sure it's much worse now, quote, found that nearly 230,000 cosmetic surgeries in the US and nearly 140,000 non-invasive cosmetic procedures were performed on teens ages 13 to 19. Obviously, the dangers that you just described are applicable to adults, but what do you think is causing these? Not only I assume when someone as young as 13 or 15 gets plastic surgery, they're doing that with the consent of their parents. Presumably their parents are paying for it. What has happened in our culture that it's now very common for people that young who are sort of at the peak of their aesthetic, appearance, who are growing into their bodies, to get irreversible plastic surgeries, including quite dangerous ones?
Mm-hmm. In my opinion, it would be because of social media and these young people, boys and girls, comparing themselves to, celebrity icons like Kylie Jenner's and the Hadid sisters, people that they see as being perfect, and they're comparing themselves to what they're seeing and what they're being told is, the epitome of beauty, and what they're seeing in the mirror may not match up to that. And the parents, I think, are trying to help them because they're seeing that their son or daughter is feeling deeply insecure. Maybe they're being bullied at school, maybe they're being bullied online, and they think that they're actually helping them by allowing them to get this plastic surgery to tweak their appearance, to make them feel more confident. But the problem is, plastic surgery rarely leads to someone feeling more confident for long. It's kind of, they might feel more confident for a year and then they'll move on to the next insecurity, and it kind of turns into a slippery slope where they're starting to pick out flaws that don't really exist. It's just that we all look totally different, but they're picking out these flaws. They're comparing themselves to what they see online and what they're seeing in celebrity culture, and even influencers, and feeling like if they could just, fix this flaw that they're focusing on, that they'll be happier and they'll be more confident. But as we're seeing with the research, that's just not the way it works.
So in one respect, we've always had this kind of model of beauty that we were supposed to strive to and admire that was basically unattainable for most people. I mean, most women are not going to look like Rita Hayworth, and most men aren't going to look like Clark Gable or Brad Pitt or whoever is presented to us as sort of the model of the highest amount of beauty. And yet it does seem like, even though I'm sure that did create insecurities in people, like, oh, I don't look like that, and I will never look like that, and therefore I'm not beautiful or handsome or whatever, it does seem pretty clear that something about how this manifests in the age of the internet, and particularly social media, causes these pressures to intensify greatly, almost qualitatively, to a different kind of universe. What do you think explains that?
I think, if you're comparing it to, say, the beauty standards of the 1950s with, women comparing themselves to the film stars, I would say those film stars were very far removed. Like, it was very obvious that they were, celebrities, and celebrities were very far removed. When nowadays you've got, celebrity culture, you've got these influencers, and the Kardashians on your phone. And it seems much more almost like you're being invited into their lives, like you are almost on the same level as them, except you don't look like them because you don't have access to the plastic surgeons that they do. You probably don't have access to the money that they do in order to pay for the best plastic surgeons. But it's not just that. It's also, you've got your influencer who might live in the same town as you, who you see on TikTok, and you don't realize that they're using a body slimming filter and a facial filter, which makes them look totally different to what they look like in real life. But you don't know that because it's not being disclosed. And so instead of being in the 1950s where people may be comparing their beauty to, Marilyn Monroe, she was very obviously on a whole nother level. Nowadays with social media, it makes it seem like everybody but you is aesthetically perfect, and that can really take a toll on people's self-esteem. And so that's why they go to such lengths as getting plastic surgery or Botox and filler.
Yeah, I mean, some of your videos that I think are really interesting draw this analogy between how social media makes everybody seem like they're living this very luxurious life of extremely expensive items and travel and homes. And so a lot of people start going majorly into debt just to buy the same bags or the same cosmetics or the same clothing that is way out of their range, because just like they don't feel beautiful, they don't feel like their lives are as happy. But you alluded to this earlier, but before I started paying attention to this and watching your show and a couple others like it that cover the same topics, I mean, I probably would have dismissed this as kind of, I don't know if trivial is the right word, but maybe benign. You know, exactly as you suggest, we're all taught to look at Botox and fillers, the kind of basic plastic surgeries, as being sort of harmless. As you said, you just go in, you lunch break, get a couple needles in your face or, you know, into your lips or whatever, your cheeks, and then you leave and, you know, eventually it just kind of disappears. But one of the things beyond that is that there are some really horrifying procedures being done, like removing buccal fat from your face that you've covered as well. So kind of break those up into two sections, namely the really gruesome procedures that are kind of new that a lot of people are actually getting, but also the harms that might come from these more benign, seemingly benign procedures like having your lips and face full of filler.
So, like I said, so we're told that, you know, Botox and filler are non-invasive, they're temporary. If it goes wrong, it doesn't matter because it doesn't last very long. So even if you end up injecting too much filler into your face, it's not a problem because you can just get hyaluronidase and dissolve it like it never happened. And that's what we thought for a long time, and that's what most people still think because that's what we're being told by our injectors and, you know, through people we watch on social media. But there's new studies that say that filler, for example, it never actually dissolves. It just migrates to different parts of your face and body, which is kind of gross as it is. But the worst part about it is that migration can actually cause the filler to block your lymphatic drainage, which is a huge issue because your lymphatic system obviously is how your body kind of removes toxins and waste that it doesn't want. And so because these girls are being told that filler is temporary and it's dissolving and that they need to go for a top up every, you know, 6 months or 4 months when they notice that the filler is not quite as plump as it was, what they're actually doing is getting filler on top of filler on top of filler. And the thing is, they don't even realize that they're not looking how they thought they would look. It's called filler fatigue. So what they're seeing in the mirror is not what other people are seeing when they look at them. So what they're seeing in the mirror is, you know, I look beautiful. I've got my filler done. You know, my lips are plump. My cheekbones are looking great. I've got a great sculpted jawline with this filler. But what other people are seeing is that their face and their facial features are becoming distorted because it's filler on top of filler on top of filler that's not actually dissolving. It's just migrating to other areas of the face. So that's a huge issue.
And so then, before you get to the rest, I just to interject quickly there, I presume there are like exams or tests that doctors aren't able to do that show the presence of fillers and other things we were trained to think were harmless, like years into the future and migrating, as you said, into the lymph nodes, into the immune system and the like. I mean, are there now ways that doctors can detect the presence of these toxins for a long time?
So I believe the way they're detecting it now is with an MRI. So they inject some kind of, it's like a fluorescent dye.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, but something, I think it's a little bit different to that, but something similar to that. And they can actually see where the filler is and how much filler has been building up in the body. So there's a few people that are doing that. But obviously, you know, your girl next door, she's not going to pay to go and get an MRI, which is extremely expensive to see how much filler she still has in her body. So it's a real problem.
So talk about some of these more kind of invasive and I think like very dystopian and grotesque and actually quite unhealthy procedures that a lot of people are doing, like removing buccal fat from your face is one of them. Can you talk about that and a couple other similar ones that are even more destructive than those ones we were just talking about?
Yeah, so we've got buccal fat, which is where a plastic surgeon, and again, this is kind of marketed as being non-invasive as far as plastic surgery goes. They're not breaking bones or anything like that. But what they'll do is they'll literally cut out the pocket of fat that sits underneath your cheekbone to give you supermodel-esque cheekbones. And you can even, double down on that by getting filler then into your cheekbones, and you end up having this really fashionable, gaunt face. But you can't reverse things like that. Once your buccal fat is gone, it's gone. And the problem is, if the trends change, which they always do, you can just looking back at history will show you that, what are you going to do? Your buccal fat is gone. So then you'll probably have to get some kind of implant. And this is the problem. It's kind of a rolling train. And it's like you do one thing to keep up with the beauty standard, but then the beauty standard changes. And then you're having to change yourself again and undo these plastic surgeries that you had done to try and meet the current beauty standards. But I think the worst one is the BBL, which stands for Brazilian butt lift. And this is where a plastic surgeon will go in and take the fat from the less desirable areas of a woman's body and re-inject the fat into her bum and her hips. So they'll take fat from the stomach, from the back, and then re-inject it into her bum and hips. But this is literally one of the most deadly plastic surgeries. And so many women have died in an attempt to be beautiful and have a body like, Kim Kardashian, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you know, but we're based in Brazil, and that is, for a long time, had been regarded as the plastic surgery capital, and it's very common to just read articles about women going to plastic surgeons, sometimes unlicensed ones, but even licensed ones, and simply dying because of the desire to have their fat removed from one place and put it into their butt. As you said, it's kind of shocking that doctors would even do that's even permissible under the Hippocratic Oath, but I guess it is. And speaking of that, that's a good segue into what I wanted to ask you. You've talked a lot about the cultural influences, kind of, big celebrities who are encouraging this sort of thing by doing it to themselves. But there's also obviously a very lucrative industry here. I mean, there's, plastic surgery clinics popping up all over the place, a huge glut now of people who are studying plastic surgeons. It's very lucrative as you go for 15 minutes, but it's still, people are still paying a lot, which means you can do this to a lot of people. And then you have a bunch of kind of adjacent industries, like the companies that make the toxins and make the poisons and create the tools by which this is done. How significant of a factor do you think that is in this massive explosion in people seeking out all kinds of gruesome surgeries?
Well, I suppose the more plastic surgeons there are and the more, clinics there are offering these kind of procedures, the more accessible it is to the everyday woman. And obviously, where there's demand, people are going to capitalize on that because I guess everybody needs to make money. But the problem is that there's, reputable plastic surgeons who have, they're highly trained, they know what they're doing. There's still risks as with any, surgical procedure, but they're minimized. But then you've got the people who just want to capitalize on the trend. And so they're purchasing Botox and filler counterfeit off the black market and injecting it into women who are paying top dollar thinking they're getting a proper service done. And it's actually causing these women serious health issues. I mean, if you inject Botox or filler into an artery or into the wrong part of the face, you can literally cause someone to go blind. You can cause them severe infection. You can cause necrosis. So, yeah, I think the fact that there is more plastic surgeons and more clinics, and I know myself in Australia, it seems like on every street corner there's, a clinic offering Botox and filler and all these other tweakments, which I suppose there's the demand there, and they're offering their services for the demand. People want this kind of thing done. So in a way, it's not really their fault. It's more like we need to change the way we as a society see beauty and what we expect women to put themselves through in the pursuit of that beauty.
So last question, and for this last question, I'm going to use a phrase that I honestly never thought would pass my lips, especially on this show or when speaking in public, but you focus a lot on the impact of the Kardashians, the whole kind of cultural empire that they've constructed, and how sort of everything has grown out of that, like the various generations of that family that have been so just culturally ubiquitous and have been turned into products. One of the things that I find disturbing about plastic surgery and everybody trying to kind of conform to this model of not just how you appear, but as we talked about before, how you live, is that it just destroys everything interesting about human beings, their individuality, their sort of quirks, their characteristics, in order to try and just force everybody, even medically, surgically, to be like everybody else. What role do you think that family has played in sort of the cultural impact that they've had on all of this?
Huge, huge. I mean, I don't think that fillers, especially, were half as popular as they are now if it weren't for Kylie Jenner. She has had such a huge influence on especially the younger generation. And people want to look like the Kardashians because they basically epitomize the beauty standard right now. You know, they've got the big bum, the tiny waist, the big boobs, the perfect faces that look like they walk around with a filter 24/7. And women are told that if we get BBLs and liposuction and Botox and fillers and plastic surgery, that we can be as beautiful as the Kardashians. And potentially, if you're as beautiful as the Kardashians, you might also be as successful as the Kardashians. You might be able to live in a mansion and buy the latest designer handbag. But I agree with you. It is destroying everything about us that makes us look unique. And I think that's such a shame because there is beauty in every single person. And that doesn't mean that we all have to subscribe to this exact same beauty standard. And that's part of the reason I love makeup. Obviously, I love makeup, but that's because you can wash it off at the end of the day. You don't have to wear it tomorrow if you don't want to. Whereas, things like Botox and filler and plastic surgery, you are sometimes permanently altering your bone structure, altering the way you look in order to look like somebody else because you are being told that this is what you are supposed to look like as a woman in 2024 if you want to be beautiful and have a good life and be successful. And if you don't look like that, I can see why women go down this route because I did it myself, because it takes a huge toll on your self-esteem and your self-worth.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing adolescent boys and young adults also being driven increasingly into that as well, though it's still often directed overwhelmingly at women. All right, so I think our audience can see why I really appreciate your show. Tell people, just please, before I let you go, where they can find your show or whatever else it is that you do on any platform.
So mostly I'm just on YouTube under the name Stephanie Lange. I'm also on Instagram, but I'll admit I don't keep up with it very well. I basically spend all my time trying to make in-depth YouTube videos on a range of topics that I think impact women today.
Yeah, and your videos are very well edited and very well produced, very well thought through. So I really encourage people to watch them, even if you don't think yet that you have a particular interest in this topic. I think you'll find that you will. Stephanie, it's great to see you out of your little YouTube box and in a different environment. I enjoyed talking to you, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks so much, Glenn. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.